was a hell of a chat this week. Holy smokes. How's it going, everybody? It's me, your cosmic of crackness, with the weekly comic wrap up video. I just in the mood, and I figured I'd do it a little earlier than I normally do. Um, it was a great chat this week. We had a special guest, a special guest. We had a special guest, Mr. Earl Grey, making an appearance on the chat. Hello, Mr. DaCosta. We had it over on Damien Sleepy Reader's channel. The four of us, fantastic 2.5 hour session with a lot of incredible chat in the comments, as always, or in the chat room, as always. Go and check it out. We're hoping to have him back next week. The thing, hello, Gorilla Todd. See, does my name? No, my name doesn't come up. I called myself Cosmic Crack now on these live streams due to your mispronunciation there, your mistake, which I loved. I really enjoy Cosmic Crack. I really like that. So we're hoping to kind of have him back, and I'll say the same thing that I said at the end of the chat there too, that if anybody's ever interested in coming to hang out with us to talk comics, and keeping in mind that what we talk about is stuff that we've actually read, and stories and series that we like, etc. Feel free to reach out. You can reach out through the comments section here, and we can hook up. Or if you see me on Twitter, send me a message that way as well too. And we're always open to having people on, rotating guest spots. So just diving right into, I'm going to save one of them for last. Just diving right into it, we'll start with a couple of the indie stuff, the small press stuff that I got in the mail. We'll start off with Magical Beatdown Volume 1. Not too much to say about this other than what I've... we have our chats. We'll pause on this for 1 second. So we have a Sunday chat, me, Larasa, and Sleepy Reader 666. We had Earl Grey on this week. In the past, Dr. Monkeybot has been involved. Mr. DaCosta has been involved. We just do kind of a weekly chat every Sunday. Sometimes it's on Damien's channel. Sometimes it's on Rasa's. Sometimes it's on mine. We sort of do a rotating schedule of who hosts. But every Sunday, well, most Sundays anyway, we do take the occasional Sunday off. We just sit and talk, and it's literally about what we've read this week, and comics that we've been enjoying. And every week the stack of books that I've read kind of shrinks and grows depending. So that's kind of it started just over a year ago, or maybe it was about a year ago, on Dr. Monkeybot's channel when everybody was in lockdown. It was one of those things where lockdown just became so kind of overwhelming that the three of us decided that we would start to have a chat. Originally it was me and Dr. Monkeybot, and then Rasa came in, and we just kind of had a weekly get together where we just talked comics, forgot about what was going on with COVID, just didn't talk about any of that stuff, just purely hung out, had some drinks, talked some comics. And it's usually around 2:30, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time, which is what I am here in Manitoba. So it's been a lot of fun, something that has really been enjoyable over the year that we've been doing it. So this is Silver Sprocket, put this one out. I mean, like I said, there's not much to really say about it. The art is really great. It starts off with this kind of dark blue, and then as things kind of escalate, we start to see a transition into pink, and then the rest of the story, once she's kind of fully transformed, then it's all in pink, and then it's just out and out violence after that. It's enjoyable enough, quick little read. The art is pretty good, sort of, Sailor Moon-ish type manga there. Pretty fun. I don't know if there's a second issue as well too. I don't know if it's on the top of my list as something that I'm going to run out to grab. But this was a fun little read. I would say that if you find this somewhere for cheap, if you're so lucky to find it out in the wild for cheap, absolutely pick it up. It's good fun. And then the other one that I read was by Lane Yates and Michael R. Muller, and it's If on Account of Sunday. This was pretty enjoyable, actually. It took me by surprise. This was another one that was recommended by Ryan for Color Apocalypse. 2020. We get two kind of main characters. One who is, it appears to be going through a divorce, talking to his buddy who's already gone through a divorce, and sitting around and drinking beers. And out of as they start to get in an argument, out of kind of the mud or the earth, this human being grows. And then we leave our two characters that we've been introduced to, and we now follow around our new character as he kind of gets used to the world and existence and what this planet is. Meets up with a woman and ends up living with her. And, it just kind of goes from there. Pretty great. I love the kind of minimal style. I like the format of this. It feels like it's something that came off of somebody's photocopier and they just gave it a kind of rough fold in half, threw a staple in it, and went from there. Yeah, I'm not familiar with either of these creators. I'll be keeping my eye out, though, to see what else they've done as I continue down the path of getting into some of these small press and indie publishers. So that was a fun read. I'll kind of whip through the ones that I talked about in the chat, and then we'll get to the ones that I didn't talk about today. We'll start with this one. One that it took me by surprise. I actually really enjoyed this, and one of the things that happened when we were talking about it this afternoon, talking about the book again, made me realize how much I enjoyed it. And it was actually a lot more than I had originally thought. Just a fantastic story. Fantastic 4 stories, rather. Actually, I should show the back first there. So this is the list of the creators. So I'm not sure how many issues this is going to be. I'm assuming it's a 4 or 6 issue miniseries. Every one is kind of an anthology format, in the same vein of Batman Black and White. Hello, Costin Bromstar. Hello, Comic Cryptic Castle Hills. In the same vein of like this Marvel title and Batman Black and White. This is Superman Red and Blue, and I love it. I love this format. I love that we get these little stories from people. I love that it's about a character that I don't really know that much about. I've never been a huge Superman fan, but these stories I thought worked really, really well. I was saying in the chat this afternoon that there's definitely, oh, that's right. Yeah, you did mention that on Twitter there, John. Issue number 3 will have a Leon, John Paul Leon, is that his full name? Cover. Lost my train there for a second. Yeah, I honestly don't remember. I just love that we can get these little stories by creators that you don't normally see doing these superheroes, and kind of get just a little taste. The other thing that's impressive about this, it does feel like they're full on fleshed out mini short stories. So that would be my one complaint with, we'll actually jump right to it. That would be my one complaint with this Marvel book. Super fun. The art has been exceptional in this series. There's been some real highlights. The one criticism that I would have, and I mean, I guess the other thing, keeping in mind, I've only read this one issue, so I didn't pick up issue number 2. The one criticism I would have about this is that some of the stories didn't feel like they were fleshed out stories. It didn't feel like there was a beginning, middle, and an end. They're still great. I don't mind getting a little kind of slice of a story that is more about paying homage or paying respect to the original creators and the characters themselves. I don't mind that kind of stuff. It felt to me like this one had a little bit more going for it as far as like a beginning, middle, and end to each of the stories. And like I said, that's where I was at. The optimistic nature of the character I found really resonated with me. It's been a hell of a year, as we all know, a year plus actually. It's kind of nice to read a Superman stories that have that kind of optimism going for them. I loved this Spider-Man story. So this is issue number 1 of the Marvel series. It's now over, but this Spider-Man tale was great, and I think that the art really just elevated the whole story for me. Really brought me into it. He's talking about it's him and Mary Jane basically having some marital woes. She's asking him to watch his spending. Do you really need to use all that webbing all over the place? I see it. It's all over the news. Your webbing is hanging off of buildings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then he gets into a fight and doesn't have enough webbing to kind of get himself out of it. So he has to kind of fashion something else. So yeah, it was a good little story. And it was also nice to kind of get the first piece of our kind of front and back ends of Marvel with Doctor Strange and Nightmare, just how it all started with this gorgeous Alex Ross art, which I love these pages here. Really beautiful stuff. So highly recommended. Both of these are highly recommended. Oh yeah, Michelle Fife for issue number 3 too. That's good to know. I'm going to be picking up issue number 2, and then I'll be sticking with this red and blue for no matter how long it goes. I'm on board for sure. Another highlight for me was from last night, Marvel Fanfare. This is issue number 41. I've only got about 5 or 6 of these issues at this point. It's not really been something that's been on my radar until recently. This cover obviously stood out to me, being a huge Doctor Strange fan. And this is a Dave Gibbons, so Walt Simonson, Dave Gibbons on art. And I loved this story so much that I want another 4 issues or 5 issues or 12 issues. It feels like there's a story here that could really be fleshed out into some interesting areas. Doctor Strange is asleep and is awoken by a presence that is in his sanctum sanctorum, and it just kind of goes from there. He finds the person that's hiding in the shadows or made invisible by sending his cloak down the stairs, floating down the stairs as a decoy. When he wants to know where he's come from, he does an amazing thing by just reversing time around the figure that he's disintegrated to see where he has come from so he can follow him. Ends up following him into this dream world, where he comes face to face with such classic foes again as Nightmare, which is a beautiful piece of art there, just gorgeous. And everybody's favorite, Eternity. It's a beautiful page. This humming stays through the entire time that he's there. He starts to kind of sink into the world a little bit till he snaps himself out of it. And eventually he comes to find out that the city that he's exploring is actually on the back of this sleeping giant, basically, who's still asleep but is starting to wake up due to Doctor Strange's appearance in his realm and how impressed he is by his ability to make it as far as he did. And this is kind of where I wish there was a couple of issues to flesh out this story, because I think you could really have a nice bit of fun with this section here. The creature wants to basically have a dialogue with Doctor Strange, and so that would be so interesting to explore even more. That said, it ends pretty abruptly, and Doctor Strange seals off a door as he goes back to his home, never wanting to enter that realm again. Amazing, and like I said, Dave Gibbons' art is just phenomenal. And there's the front and the back page there, so you get a little piece of the back page. So highly recommended, and I'm sure that I'm way late to the game with this Marvel Fanfare. Like I said, I've never paid it any attention. I've seen it in the bins as I'm searching for stuff. And the covers, there's been some covers that have jumped out at me for sure, but I've honestly never given it a second look. I didn't realize what was contained within those pages. One of the other things I read, I think I saw it on the Kayfabe channel. They had a recent video where they were kind of looking for ideas from the viewers on what kind of things to cover next. One of the books they pulled out was something from this solo series. Pardon me, Damian Scott. Sorry, wasabi for dinner tonight. Wasabi and sushi. I have a couple of the solo ones, Darwin Cook, Brendan McCarthy, Richard Corbin. I've never got the rest of the issues from this run, but I'm going to make it a point now to dig for more of these and get the whole thing. I'm not familiar with this artist. He comes from a graffiti background, from what I understand. And so they showed it in the Kayfabe video as one of the things to talk about, like talk about the whole run of Solo itself. And when they showed pages, I was instantly transfixed and went out, I think, the next day to hunt for it at one of the comic shops by my office. Beautiful stuff here. So we get a flash story. We get, again, it's some short stories. The stories themselves didn't stick with me whatsoever. I was more into it for the art because it has this kind of wild graffiti style to it with colored in with marker is what it looks like to me. Yeah, I bet you the Paul Pope is fantastic. I don't doubt it. It's just another one of those I just haven't picked up every issue, and I don't know why. It seems like a no-brainer now that I look back on it. Some beautiful stuff. The thing that happened to me by the end of the book was that I was glad that it was only one issue. While I really enjoyed this art and I thought it was on the whole, it worked really well, I couldn't imagine sitting down to read like a 4-issue miniseries or a 6-issue miniseries of his work. So good for what it was. I don't know if I'm rushing out to find more of his work. And this is Damian Scott from his solo issue. Apparently he did some other stuff for DC as well. So this is issue 10 of that run. So yeah, a Batman story as well. Worth checking out. Again, I would say if you see it, yeah, definite graffiti influence with this artist. He does a little write-up at the beginning and talks about his time as a graffiti artist. Definitely one to see. If you see in the cheap bins, don't hesitate. One that sort of reminded me of Carmen a little bit, and then in many ways did not. I gave this a shot. This The Many Deaths of Layla Starr from Ram V. Philippe on, oh boy, I'm so sorry. I'm going to completely butcher these names. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold up the credits page and not make an ass of myself. Chapter 1 from Boom Studios. Again, it was one of those where the art grabbed me, the coloring grabbed me. It was a fantastic little read. So why do I feel like this is another one that maybe I've spoken about last week? John, you'll stop me if you've heard this one before. Death is now out of a job because there's been there's a baby that's been born that is going to help make everybody omnipotent. What's the word? That people won't die anymore. Will have everlasting life. So she's now sent down into the body of a human being. She wants to get reincarnated into the body of a human being that's close by where this baby is born, because her plan is to kill the baby. The God of Death. Yes, thank you very much. Yes. And it just goes from there. It's a really great introduction. I'm in love with the art style. I think it's really gorgeous work. The coloring is fantastic as well. Again, another one that I just randomly pulled off the shelf. I don't know how many issues it's going. I'll be checking it out though. So The Many Deaths of Layla Starr from Boom. Continuing in with issue number 5 of Rima the Jungle Girl. And I haven't read issue number 6 or 7 yet because this one kind of stopped me in my tracks. Again, it's Damien Sleepy Reader who turned us on to this more recently. I have heard of the title before, but he really brought the spotlight on us, or on this title with us, rather. And the first 4 issues were phenomenal, but then I read this one, and this is another one I feel like I've spoken about already. It just ended abruptly. It was just this kind of really going nowhere story that wrapped itself up really, really quickly. It didn't kind of have the charm that the first 4 issues did. It didn't seem to have that, I don't know, man. It didn't seem to have that feel from the first 4 issues, even though nothing has changed. Actually, let me double check that. As far as I remember, nothing has changed creator-wise. Oh, maybe it did. So it's Nestor Redondo, writer Robert Kanigher, and now I'm blanking on who was the writer on the first 4. So yeah, I mean, the art is still gorgeous. There's no doubt about it. The story just left a lot to be desired for me. And then thankfully, though, we still had the Alex Nino, Space Voyagers backup story with Nino's exceptional art. This panel here with these giant ants, it's fantastic looking. I love all the angles and the curves that's going on in that panel there. He's got a hell of a way of drawing people, and again, all this kind of almost like just stabbing at the page with paint or black ink, rather, just to make those marks on those figures. I saw that. So it's good that you got 2 and 3, but you were shorted number 1. Is that because they forgot to order it, or that's coming in a separate order? Because that's real shit. And honestly, it's not a name I'm familiar with, Mr. Foam Panels. I feel like his name came up recently in something else, though, that we were talking about this afternoon, and now I don't remember what. Oh, I remember what it was. It was here, wasn't it? Yeah, it sure as hell was. So this is the same writer who's on the new Swamp Thing here. There we go. So the new Swamp Thing series, Ram V is the writer here as well too. This is issue number 3. I haven't read it yet. I haven't found issue number 1 and 2. I saw this one on the shelf and I figured I would just grab it because I love this cover. I'm really curious to read this series. Earl Grey was talking about it today on the chat as well, saying that I think he was saying 10 or 12 issue series or whatever it's going to be. So I'm going to be checking that out. So that's why that name is familiar. Yeah, so Rima. Great backup story, not so great main story. So that kind of put the brakes on for me as far as diving into number 6 and 7. I'm still going to get to them, but it all of a sudden became less important to get there right away. We didn't talk about it this afternoon. Actually, let's go here first. We'll save these 2 for last. This is The Adventures of Yoko, Vic, and Paul, book number 2, The 3 Sons of Vina. I'm glad I tried it out. The art is very nice. It's definitely something that's written for a much younger audience, which isn't a criticism. It's just, it is what it is. But that was the other thing with it. The story really laid out very kind of simply to make it really easy to follow. There wasn't a lot going on here that kept my interest. It was fun enough to read. And clearly there's more with these, all of these characters together. that maybe it gets into a little more detail as the story evolves. But it's one of those that it's enjoyable. It's staying with me, but another one that I'm not going to be kind of jumping on to keep searching for. Some really nice pages though. Stuff like this is really, really nice. So yeah, that was it. That was not much else to say about that one. Another one that I read just the other night, Burton and Sib or Cybe maybe, because he's kind of part cyborg. A collection of short stories of two characters who are kind of intergalactic conmen. Very unfortunate front panel there. They're getting their photos taken, but it sure doesn't look like it. Yeah, these were on their own very entertaining enough. I feel like they came from the pages of Heavy Metal magazine. Super quick, just these kind of stories of these kind of jams, these scrapes that they get themselves into, and how they're going to make money out of these little situations. Yeah, nothing too complex. Some gorgeous art, no doubt about it, but a nice kind of light read. There's not a lot to get confused on as you're reading through these stories. It doesn't take all of your focus. You can kind of drift in and out of reading. So that was fun. The art was the draw on this one for sure. And then for the final three, sorry, I'm firing through some of these because I have more to say about the last couple than some of these other ones. So that's why I'm not focusing too much on them. The Garden of Desire from Will Desberg that I talked about this afternoon as well, from the NBM sub-label Erotica. Really nice little stories. Again, it's one of those that as I think about it again, holding the book up and going page to page through these little stories, I enjoy them more, kind of thinking back on them. Our main character is a definite kind of Casanova of sorts, and this is just short stories about the various women in his life and what's gone wrong with those relationships, and why he wants to remain single. That's a good point, actually, DaCosta. It might have been 2000 AD. You're absolutely right. That's what it that is what it reminds me of too. Yeah, so maybe that's where it came from instead of Heavy Metal. What I did want to point out, I mean, the art in this one I think is gorgeous. The coloring is really, really nice. The chapter breaks are beautiful. I love the use of the pages there, the black and white backgrounds, and then the characters within just in full color. Really, really nice use of a double page spread to mark the passages of time there, or the different stories rather. And then, like happened in Monsters, which we'll talk about in a bit, it's almost like he's writing a letter to you. It's kind of, this is his diary. This is his last word to humanity once he's passed on, of what his life was and what was important in his life. Yeah, really, really great. Recommended. Earl Grey this afternoon pointed out another book by the same creator. It's a name that's on my radar now. I'll be searching for more. So the final two that I probably have the most to say. Reckless. This is Reckless book number 2, Friend of the Devil. Thank goodness is all I got to say. So first of all, thank goodness that the book opens and I didn't have to fight it to get to the next page. So that was the first relief. And thank goodness that it feels like Brubaker with this one is back on his game as far as writing goes. I really like this story. I would almost argue that if you decided to pass on book 1, you'd be okay. Yes, of course, there's always going to be some backstory to these characters that you're going to be missing out on, but I do feel like this is the stronger of the 2 books so far. And for me personally, stronger by kind of a long shot. Yeah, I mean, it also might be a case of when I read the first Reckless volume there, I just wasn't in the mindset for it. That's always a possibility, but this one feels like it worked a lot better for me. Maybe it's also due to the subject matter. He's going looking for a missing woman in that kind of pre-story. He goes to a library to look at some information and meets the librarian, who starts, eventually they have a relationship together, and she tells him, she comes into his, let's see if I can find the page actually. He lives in a movie theater and he sits there and watches movies. Yeah, here we go. He watches movies, and she comes in. She comes in as he's watching one about kind of a cult of Satan worshippers, of devil worshippers, and she's kind of frozen in her tracks. Asks if he can rewind it somehow, and points out a woman in the background as her sister, who's been missing for 8 years. So then we get into the backstory of her as a stepsister. So this is her step family, and talking about her sister, and how their relationship was, and kind of what happened to her. So hires Reckless on as hires him on as kind of her agent, basically her secret agent, or man, I'm just blanking on stuff today. Hens hires him on to search for her sister, and the story unfolds from there. We go into kind of older Hollywood. We go into kind of B and exploitation movie realms, and just kind of the tragedy that was what happened to her sister, getting mixed up in basically a cult. I loved it. I thought it was great. Yeah, I won't say too much beyond that. Again, with his art, it's funny because I recently went back and kind of did a side by side just for myself comparison of Sean Phillips' art in here and looking at that first Criminal book. And it isn't as dramatically different as I thought, as my memory leads me to believe. There is definitely a difference, and I would point to stuff like this, like that panel seems a little awkward to me. So there are still things that don't quite work for my eye, but overall, it's still kind of on par with his older work, and that kind of surprised me a little bit, to be honest. So maybe that has to do with a couple of things, just the stories resonating with me more from the Criminal world. Yeah, no, I don't want to show anything from the back there. So really, really well done. Much better than the first volume. Yeah, that is absolutely one of their go-tos, crime genre, and then old Hollywood. Yeah, for sure. And I think that makes sense when you look at kind of all of the comics, the individual comics that they do. There's always back matter in most of those series to do with like old movies, 70s movies, and kind of crime writers, that sort of thing. So it makes sense that they're steeped in that, the same world potentially that a guy like Tarantino is kind of steeped in as well. So yeah, a good volume. I'm looking forward. Again, I'm looking forward now to the next one. I'm glad that I gave it a shot and didn't pass on it. So the final beast in the room, we spoke about it for, I don't know, the first at least half hour, maybe 45 minutes of the chat this afternoon. The title that seems to be on a lot of people's minds, or not Earl Grey, sorry, Gore Vidal had a great video today as well too, looking at this book and kind of his thoughts on it. I loved this book. Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I'm starting to feel like that. When I first was exposed to it, I felt the exact same way. I couldn't get into it, but then once I started reading Criminal, the stories really just grabbed me. But I feel like I'm kind of working my way back to that, where there's just something about his art that's just not working for me as much as it used to, which is interesting because I love his cover designs, and he's done some work for Criterion as well too, that I think is really phenomenal. So maybe he just needs to be the cover designer, and give someone else a turn at doing interior art. Brubaker needs to expand his circle maybe a little bit. This was a hell of a book. So 365-ish pages. It took him many, many years to kind of finish this work. Shopped it around to other companies, being Marvel and DC, to which he was just turned down, and then just focused on doing this himself. And he's created something that is harrowing, is sad, it's touching, and it's also just incredible. Really, really amazing. Uh, there's so much in here to talk about that I don't want to rehash too much of the territory from that conversation. I'll just focus basically on a couple of the moments, one of them specifically that, again, and Gore Vidal, yes, Gore Vidal touched on it in his book, in his video as well too, where there's some things that just happen in comics that you couldn't possibly translate to the big screen. He was pointing at a moment between two of our main characters where they kiss just before she heads on a bus to go back home, and he pointed at a couple of panels, 3 panels I think, of just this still of her face, and you can see kind of the pain in her face. And I would point to this one for me. This was a showstopper for me. So we get to a point where we're reliving the past now. We're steeped in the past history of our main character, and what his life was like. Bailey, what his life was like at home, filled with abuse. The mother is now at kind of her breaking point. Her brother has come with his wife from France for Thanksgiving dinner, I believe it was, and everything is about to explode. And at one point, she is talking to her sister-in-law, and all of this conversation, there's an argument happening in the background between her brother and her husband, and then her and her sister-in-law are having a conversation. And at one moment, she just says, see if that focuses, you can just see her say, "Help me," and this look of anguish on her face. Immediately, the next panel, she just kind of puts on her smile again and goes for it. But that helped me, and I think Gore Vidal said the same thing. Gore Vidal said the same thing in the chat of that. There's no actor that could have pulled that off, and it's one of the things with comic that I think really works well, because my internal dialogue on it and the internal way that I'm reading that, and someone couldn't interpret it the way that I'm feeling it. It was one of those moments I stopped the book and I had tears in my eyes, because just this moment, and because it's this very brief moment before things completely explode. And again, the tension that he builds in this book is just extraordinary. One of the things I didn't talk about is when I was reading the final chunk of it, I read it in kind of 3 different sittings. The last chunk I was reading in bed, and my wife came up afterwards getting ready to go to bed. She's like, "Wow, you must be reading something intense." I'm like, "Why?" She's like, "Because I've heard you call out a couple of times as you've been reading it, and it really is one of those where I made a noise of kind of disgust or shock a number of times throughout this, out loud, not internally." So she started asking about the book, and I started talking to her about it, and she says, "Wow, that sounds like something I would like to read." So we started talking about it a little bit more, and I showed her some of the panels and some of the stuff later on that happens kind of around the Nazis. It just reached a point. She's like, "Oh, okay, no, that's it. No, I can't read that. Not going to read that." It's not a story for the faint of heart. It's intense, and the idea of and it's a conversation we've had in the house a couple of times before. We recently watched Fire Walk with Me, the Twin Peaks movie, which I think is arguably one of the better David Lynch movies, period. It is so incredibly sad. You feel so bad for Laura Palmer. It's gut wrenching. And afterwards, my son and I were like, "That was incredible. And that was so amazing." And my wife was kind of like, "Well, yeah, but it wasn't though. It was so horrible. Like, it was well done." But she said, I wouldn't call it necessarily amazing. And it's interesting, that idea of something being well done when you're dealing with heavier or depressing subject matter versus it's still an exceptional piece of work to bring you to those places, right? So I mean, could it be argued that intensity is easier than having a love story? I don't really know. I don't know if it's worth having that conversation, but I do feel like something like this, the ability to draw you in to this degree and pace out a story. Again, this couldn't be any shorter than 364 pages. I don't know if it could be any longer than that either, because I do feel there's a couple of sections here. The as we talked about this afternoon, the super scientist Nazis, that kind of trope. I felt that part really fell flat for me a little bit. I didn't hate the way it was handled, but it did pull me out of the story a little bit. It seemed really one dimensional. When leading up to that point, there was a lot more character traits flushed out, and I felt like these were real people. The one of the other moments was, and I couldn't point to a specific panel or a specific page, but there was a moment with the father figure where I all of a sudden I went from hating his guts, wanting to see him dead, to feeling so unbelievably sorry for him. And it wasn't when we find out, it was well before we find out what happened to him in the war. It was well before that point. Um, but like I said, I couldn't pinpoint an exact page. There was just something that just kind of twisted things for me a little bit, where he just became so sad. These pages were pointed out today by Earl Grey as well too, and I'd have to echo what he was saying. Phenomenal pages, and side by side, kind of what the father is kind of dealing with, and the use of him filling up those panels there, cut to his wife, who we get to read a lot of her letters and a lot of her journaling and stuff. Um, Beautiful, beautiful 2 pages there. And then just to kind of go back to what DaCosta was saying, it wasn't anything that they said that put me off of this book. It put me off of wanting to listen to their horse shit talking about it. It was a half an hour into it or so, and I mean, you sort of have it. Ed Piskor being himself. I mean, I do enjoy their channel. I really do enjoy it. I don't watch nearly as much as I used to. I still watch quite a few of their videos, the majority of their stuff. I found that I wanted to kind of hear what they had to say. They got to the part where the one of the main characters gets killed, and they literally said, "Oh my God, I totally missed that." And that makes sense now about the end of the story. And it was such a huge moment in this. I was like, I don't want to fucking listen to you guys talk about this book anymore. If you completely missed, and to me, a huge part of kind of the metaphysical and spiritual side of the story, completely just missed. Yeah, no, and again, I'm not going to totally disagree with you. I don't find him intolerable, but there are times, definitely, I wish he would just shut the fuck up, because he does talk a bunch of shit sometimes, and it's pretty irritating. But that said, so it turned me off of just watching them talk about the book when I feel like they completely missed a huge chunk of the story. It's like, well, if you missed that, how much are you actually going to have to contribute to this, to talking about this book? So I just gave up, because it's like an hour and a half video or whatever. So that aside, and I also, just to say, I do I do love the term clown shoes. So this I would highly recommend, with kind of the little bit of a warning that this is not a happy story. This is not a everything ends on a feel good moment. I would absolutely recommend it. For sure, I would recommend it. And it's one of the things, as much as I want to talk about it, I feel that talking about it in too much depth kind of takes away some of that magic, because I didn't know the first thing about it when I went in. I knew that he wrote a book. I knew that it took him a long time. I knew that it was originally going to be maybe a Hulk story, and that it had gone to Vertigo and got turned down. But that's all that I knew about it. So I picked it up and opened it up and started reading it. So I think that that's the trouble with doing these kind of videos sometimes. I want to talk about it and I want to discuss it, but then you talk about it in too much detail, and then it loses that bit of magic for people, I think. But I would say give it a shot. I thought it was fantastic. His art is incredible. His storytelling, is just amazing. And what he's able to do with these characters in the stretches that he has, I think gives so much good backstory and really flesh out the characters in a way that I don't think you could do in any other form, even if it was just single issues that he put out over the course of a year. I think this is a book that it has to be presented like this. I don't think it could be presented in any other way. And I mean, just the title Monsters itself, you do come against these characters, some of them that, they could be these stereotypical monsters, but obviously there's more dimension to them. And I think that, yeah, he really has put some thought into it. The only thing that the kayfabe guys did say that I did agree with before I turned off their video was the idea of a creator sitting with this material for so long and sitting in this mind space or this mindset for so long to write this book must have been difficult at times. And it's part of that creative process that I don't know if I'd be able to do, because being in this world, I think for that length of time, even if you took breaks, man, that would be difficult. So major props to Mr. BWS. Yeah, and I think that was something that's been discussed too. And I mean, Fantagraphics, I've heard both sides of the argument. Fantagraphics is pretty good with keeping stuff in print if it's popular. I feel like this is one of those books that's been exceptionally popular for them. It seems like it's all over the place, and a ton of people have bought it. So if anything, they're going to keep on top of, it'll be reprinting this book. So even if it does sell out, I have a feeling that you won't have to wait too long before they do another printing. Again, I could absolutely be wrong about that, but that said, though, if you find it, I wouldn't hesitate. If you can afford it, I wouldn't hesitate. That's it, everybody. That's this week's books. I can now start filing things away and start on next week's books. I've got a bunch of stuff still from Greg that I haven't worked through. What did I find recently? Talked about that one. Found a couple of issues of All New Yang. Two of them, number 4 and number 10. And I'm dipping into some issues of Serenity. We're right now watching Firefly again, me for like the 3rd or 4th time. So I picked up issue number 14 and 13 rather of Serenity. Know that it's not going to be like the show, but I do want to live in that world a little longer, because I think the show is incredible. I know I'm going out on a limb saying that. I couldn't resist Boba Fett, Black Armor. I picked up an issue, figured I'd give it a shot. The interior art looks pretty fun, actually. Let's flip to a couple of pages. We'll see how it reads. This is one that I might be able to pass around the household because we all really enjoyed Mandalorian, and of course Boba Fett makes an appearance in there. So I have a feeling that might get some reading from the household. I picked up a 2-issue Vertigo series, The Children's Crusade, and it's Neil Gaiman, Alyssa Whitney, Jamie Delano, Peter Snellberg, a few creators. I don't know anything about this, but just a 2-issue mini, and again, it's Vertigo, and I've never heard of it, and it's from 1993, so 1993 and 1994, so I have a feeling that's going to be right in my wheelhouse. Issue number 2 of Slash. I have issue number 1 from, this is from North Star. This has a James O'Barr story in it as well. So that's going to be fun. The first one, I mean, we'll just do a quick little flip through here to see, especially and I think that this is a story that the kayfabe guys talked about as well too, this James O'Barr Zeitgeist. So you get a look at that kind of what they call outlaw comics. And then a couple of other black and white stories as well. So that'll be a fun one. Damien had talked about Khazar in a previous video or in a previous hangout. It was issue number 12, but it wasn't from the Khazar series. So I went on the hunt looking for it and thought that I found it. Didn't flip through it before I bought it, and it wasn't the actual issue. So I haven't read it. Who knows how long it'll stay. Maybe it'll be one that quickly leaves the collection. I wanted to find the one he was talking about because of the Man-Thing stuff that was contained in that one issue he showed. Hello, Gore Vidal. How are you? Just wrapping it up here. And then a couple of things that I found. I've seen these at Red River Bookshop. He has, I'm assuming, all of the issues. He's had them forever. And when I go digging through the magazines, I always see them. I've never opened one up because, again, Barry Windsor Smith wasn't someone that I was always drawn to, so he wasn't necessarily on my radar, and he wasn't a guy that I was actually looking for. Hello, Mind the Comics. So I'm looking, now that I've read Monsters, I'm really looking forward to digging into these issues. It's almost kind of, let's see, Treasury size in height. Yeah, pretty damn close to Treasury size all around, actually. Just a little bit off. So these are really, really solid books here. So I'm looking forward to checking those out. And, you know, like I said, everything else, more European stuff, and we'll see where we go from there. Thanks very much, everybody, for hanging out. Mind the Comics and Gore Vidal. Hit the rewind and go for it. All right. Have a good night, everybody. We'll talk to you next weekend.